He thought he was untouchable. He thought the world was his playground and everyone else was just scenery. When Damien Cross, the ruthless CEO of Apex Industries, tossed a crumpled $2 bill onto a $4,000 dinner tab, he didn't just want to save money. He wanted to break a spirit. He wanted to remind the struggling waitress, Evelyn, of her place in the food chain. It was supposed to be a joke, a power move. But Damien forgot one fundamental rule of the universe. The people you step on are often the only ones standing close enough to save you when you fall. That $2 insult didn't break Evelyn. It unlocked a chain reaction that would strip a billionaire of his fortune, expose his darkest secrets, and force him to beg for salvation from the very woman he tried to humiliate. This is the story of how a $2 tip cost a man his entire life. The clinking of crystal flutes against silver cutlery was the heartbeat of the Obsidian Room, the most exclusive restaurant in downtown Chicago. It was a place where deals were signed in blood and Pinot Noir, where the lighting was dim enough to hide infidelity, but bright enough to catch the sparkle of diamonds. For Evelyn Hart, however, the restaurant was just a battlefield. Evelyn adjusted her apron, smoothing the stark black fabric over her waist. Her feet throbbed. She had been on a double shift, covering for a co-worker who had called in sick again. At 28, Evelyn had the sharp intellect of a woman who should have been running a boardroom, not clearing crumbs from it. But life, as she had learned 3 years ago, when her father fell ill and the medical bills began to pile up like snowdrifts, didn't care about potential. It cared about cash. "Table 4 is yours, Evie," the maître d'honneur whispered, his face pale. "Good luck." Evelyn glanced at table 4. It was the prime spot, the rounded booth in the center of the room, elevated slightly so the occupants could look down on the rest of the diners. Sitting there was Damien Cross. Everyone in Chicago knew Damien Cross. He was 35, handsome in a predatory way, with eyes the color of cold steel and a jawline that looked like it had been chiseled from granite. He was the CEO of Apex Industries, a tech and logistics conglomerate that had swallowed up half the city's manufacturing sector. He was known for 2 things: his brilliance in hostile takeovers and his absolute lack of empathy. Tonight, he was dining with 3 other men in expensive suits, potential investors from Zurich. Evelyn took a breath, put on her professional mask, and approached the table. "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to the Obsidian Room," she said, her voice steady and warm. "May I start you off with something to drink? Perhaps a bottle of the 98 Bollinger?" Damien didn't look up. He was scrolling through his phone, his thumb flicking aggressively against the screen. "Water," he barked. "Sparkling, and don't bring that domestic trash. I want the imported mineral water, the one in the blue glass bottles. If I see plastic, I'm walking out." The investors chuckled nervously. "Of course, Mr. Cross," Evelyn said. She turned to the others. "And for you, gentlemen?" Damien cut her off. "They'll have the same, and bring the appetizers immediately. We aren't here to wait on your kitchen schedule." "I'll put the order in right away, sir." Throughout the night, Damien was a terror. He sent the soup back because it was lukewarm. It was steaming. He snapped his fingers at Evelyn whenever he wanted his glass refilled, refusing to use her name, even though he had been told it twice. He made a show of humiliating her in front of the Swiss investors, likely a tactic to show them he was a dominant alpha male who controlled his environment. "Look at this," Damien sneered, holding up a fork. "There's a water spot. A spot. Do you see this?" He shoved the fork toward Evelyn's face. "I apologize, sir. I'll replace it immediately," Evelyn said, taking the fork. Her hand didn't shake, though her blood was boiling. She thought of her father, lying in the hospital bed, the beeping monitors, the cost of his medication. Swallow the pride, Evie. You need the tips. The bill came to $4,850. The wine alone had cost more than Evelyn's car. Damien pulled out a black titanium credit card. He didn't even look at the total. He tossed the card onto the tray. Evelyn processed it and returned with the receipt. This was the moment. The service charge wasn't included at the Obsidian Room for parties under 6. It was left to the discretion of the guest. On a bill nearly touching $5,000, a standard tip would be anywhere from $800 to $1,000. That money would pay for her father's dialysis for the month. Damien signed the receipt with a flourish. He stood up, buttoning his $5,000 Brioni suit jacket. "Let's go, gentlemen," Damien said, clapping one of the investors on the back. "I have a helicopter waiting at the airstrip." They filed out, laughing. Evelyn walked to the table. She picked up the black leather folder. Her heart pounded with a mix of hope and dread. She opened it. The line for the tip was blank, but resting on top of the merchant copy of the receipt was a single, crumpled bill. $2, and scrawled on the napkin next to it in heavy black ink were the words, "Get a real job." The restaurant went silent around her. The noise of the dining room faded into a dull roar. Evelyn stared at the $2. It wasn't just cheap, it was calculated. Leaving nothing might have been an oversight. Leaving $2 was a statement. It was a declaration that her service, her time, and her dignity were worth less than a cup of coffee. Tears pricked her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She looked at the door. Damien was just passing through the vestibule, waiting for his valet. Something inside Evelyn snapped, not into a rage, but into a cold, crystalline clarity. She grabbed the $2. She grabbed the napkin, and she walked. She didn't run. She walked with the purposeful stride of a woman who had nothing left to lose. The cool night air of Chicago hit Evelyn's face as she pushed through the heavy oak doors of the restaurant. The street was lined with luxury cars, Bentleys, Mercedes, a Rolls-Royce. Damien Cross was standing by the curb, checking his gold Rolex, looking impatient. The valet was jogging toward him with the keys to a sleek, silver Aston Martin. "Mr. Cross!" Evelyn's voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the street noise like a whip. Damien turned, his brow furrowed. When he saw it was the waitress, a smirk curled on his lips. He turned to his investors who were waiting for their own cars. "Watch this," he muttered to them. "She's coming to beg for more." Typical. Evelyn stopped 3 feet from him. She stood tall, her posture perfect, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made him blink. "You forgot this," Evelyn said. She held out her hand. In her palm lay the crumpled $2 bill and the napkin. Damien laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "I didn't forget it, sweetheart. That's for you. Don't spend it all in one place." "I can't accept this," Evelyn said, her voice dangerously calm. "Why? Not enough?" Damien stepped closer, towering over her. "You want a handout? You want me to pay your rent because you know how to carry a tray? Learn your place. You're the help. I'm the talent." Evelyn didn't flinch. She took a step forward, invading his personal space. She reached out and tucked the $2 into the breast pocket of his expensive suit jacket. She patted the pocket gently, as if he were a child. "I'm returning it, Mr. Cross," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper so only he could hear. "Because based on how you treat people, I have a feeling you're going to need this much more than I do." Damien froze. The sheer audacity shocked him. No one touched him. No one spoke to him like that. "And as for the real job advice," Evelyn added, pressing the napkin into his hand, "I had one. I was a forensic accountant for Deloitte before my father got sick. And looking at your credit card receipt." She paused, her eyes gleaming with intelligence. You might want to check your liquidity. A man who flaunts wealth this aggressively usually does it to hide a hemorrhage. She turned on her heel and walked back toward the restaurant, her head held high. Damien stood on the sidewalk, stunned. The investors were staring at him. The valet was holding his door open, looking awkward. "Crazy woman," Damien muttered, ripping the $2 out of his pocket and throwing it into the gutter. "Let's go." He slid into the Aston Martin, gunning the engine to drown out the sudden, sinking feeling in his gut. He sped off into the night, convincing himself that the Waitress was just bitter trash. He had no idea that the hemorrhage she mentioned was about to become a fatal wound. 20 minutes later, Damien was speeding down Lakeshore Drive, the city lights blurring past him. His phone buzzed. It was his personal attorney, Marcus Thorne. "Damien, don't panic," Marcus said. The tone of his voice suggested that panic was the only appropriate reaction. "I don't panic, Marcus. I cause panic. What is it?" "The merger with the Zurich Group. The deal you were celebrating tonight." "What about it? They're on board. I just fed them $5,000 worth of steak and wine." "They just pulled out, Damien, 5 minutes ago." Damien slammed on the brakes, the car screeching to a halt on the shoulder of the highway. "What? Why?" "They received an anonymous tip," Marcus said, his voice trembling. "Someone sent them a breakdown of Apex Industries' shell companies, the ones we use to hide the debt from the failed lithium mines in Nevada. They know we're leveraged to the hilt, Damien. They know the stock price is artificially inflated." Damien felt the blood drain from his face. "That's impossible. Those files are encrypted. They are on the private server. Only I have access, and—" He stopped. His breath hitched. The private ledger. The physical backup. He carried a secure, encrypted flash drive with him at all times. It contained the real books, the shadow ledger that kept him out of jail and kept his investors happy. He usually kept it in the interior pocket of his suit jacket. His hand flew to his chest. He felt the silk lining of his Brioni jacket. He felt his wallet. He felt his phone. He felt the empty space where the drive should be. "Damien?" Marcus asked. "Are you there?" "The drive," Damien whispered. "It's gone." "What drive?" "The drive, Marcus. The one with the leverage. The one with the bribes, the tax evasion schemes, everything." "Where is it?" Marcus screamed. Damien's mind raced. He had been at the office, then the limo, then the obsidian room. He remembered leaning forward to mock the waitress. He remembered his jacket swinging open. It must have slipped out. It must have fallen onto the booth seat or the floor. "I left it at the restaurant," Damien gasped. "Get it," Marcus hissed. "If that drive falls into the wrong hands, if the SEC, or worse, your rival Sebastian Vane gets it, you aren't just broke, Damien. You're going to federal prison for 20 years. Damien threw the car into a U-turn, tires smoking. He drove like a maniac back toward the city center. The waitress. The realization hit him like a physical blow when she was close to him, when she put the money in his pocket. Had she taken it? No. She had been returning the insult. But she had been at the table. She had cleaned the table. "You're going to need this more than I do." Her words echoed in his skull. He pulled up to the obsidian room, jumping out of the car before it even fully stopped. He ignored the valet and sprinted inside. The restaurant was closing. The lights were turned up. The magic gone, leaving only tired staff and the smell of cleaning supplies. He ran to the maitre d'. "Where is she?" Damien demanded, grabbing Henri by the lapels. "The waitress! Table 4! Where is she?" Henri looked terrified. "Mr. Cross, please unhand me." "Where is Evelyn?" "She clocked out, sir. She left 20 minutes ago." "Where does she live?" "I can't give you that information, sir. It's against policy." Damien shoved Henri aside and ran to table 4. He fell to his knees, frantically searching the carpet. He ripped the cushions off the booth. He checked under the table. Nothing. The drive was gone. Damien stood up, breathing heavily, sweat dripping down his forehead. He looked around the empty restaurant, and then he saw it. On the table, placed perfectly in the center where his plate had been, was a napkin. He walked over to it, his hands shaking. It was the same napkin he had written on, but there was a new message written in elegant, feminine script underneath his jagged scrawl of "Get a real job." The new message read, "I found something of yours. It looks expensive. I'd love to return it, but I'm afraid my hourly rate for consulting just went up." Significantly. Damien stared at the note. The waitress had the drive. The waitress he had humiliated, mocked, and tipped $2 now held the nuclear codes to his entire existence in her hands. He pulled out his phone and dialed Marcus. "Well?" Marcus asked. "She has it," Damien whispered. "The waitress has it." "Buy it back," Marcus said. "Give her whatever she wants. 10,000, 50,000. Damien looked at the note again. He remembered the intelligence in her eyes. He remembered her mentioning she used to be a forensic accountant. She knew exactly what she was holding. She knew exactly what it was worth. "Marcus," Damien said, his voice hollow. "I don't think 50,000 is going to cut it. I think I just started a war." The rain in Chicago didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. By 3 a.m., Damien Cross was pacing the floor of his penthouse on the 45th floor of the Apex Tower. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city he thought he owned. But tonight, the lights below looked like warning fires. He poured himself a glass of scotch, a 50-year-old Macallan that suddenly tasted like battery acid, and stared at his phone. Thorne, his attorney, had gone silent. That was never a good sign. Thorne only went quiet when he was mitigating disaster or preparing a defense for a federal indictment. Damien's reflection in the glass looked haunted. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the feral desperation of a trapped animal. He needed that drive. It wasn't just the tax evasion. The drive contained the unencrypted communications between Apex Industries and Blackwood Logistics, a shadow firm Damien used to bypass trade embargoes in Eastern Europe. If that got out, he wouldn't just lose his company. He would be an international criminal. His phone buzzed. It wasn't Thorne. It was a number he didn't recognize. "Speak," Damien answered, his voice jagged. "Mr. Cross." The voice was gravelly, low and devoid of emotion. It was Cole, a private investigator, or more accurately, a cleaner. Damien kept on retainer for problems that lawyers couldn't fix. "I found her." "Where?" Damien demanded, gripping the phone. "Is she still at the restaurant?" "No, she's home. I ran the plate on her car, a 2014 Honda Civic, barely running, registered to an Evelyn Hart. Address is in South Chicago, the Pill Hill area. It's not a place you want to park the Aston Martin, boss. I don't care about the car. Send me the address. Now." "Sending it. But listen, Mr. Cross, I did a deep dive on this girl. You need to be careful." Damien scoffed. "She's a waitress, Cole. I don't need a threat assessment for a woman who serves salads." "She's not just a waitress," Cole interrupted, his tone sharp. "She was a senior auditor at Deloitte before she dropped off the grid 3 years ago. Specialization in forensic recovery of hidden assets. She was the lead on the Enron cleanup team's B squad. She knows how to hide data, and she knows how to find it. If she has your drive, she's likely already cracked the encryption." Damien felt a cold sweat break out on his neck. "She's a forensic accountant? Why is she waiting tables? Hard times hit everyone differently. I'm sending the coordinates. Do you want me to go in?" "No," Damien said quickly. He couldn't risk Cole doing something violent. If Evelyn disappeared or got hurt, and the drive was set to automatically upload to the cloud, a dead man's switch, Damien was finished. He had to handle this personally. He had to negotiate. "I'll handle it." He hung up. A moment later, his phone pinged with an address: 402 Dalbulatum, 87th Street, Apt 3B. Damien grabbed his trench coat. He left the penthouse, bypassing his security detail. He took the freight elevator down to the garage. He looked at the Aston Martin, then shook his head. Cole was right. That car was a beacon. Instead, he walked to the back of the garage where the company kept a fleet of nondescript SUVs for site inspections. He keyed into a black Ford Explorer. It smelled of stale coffee and dust, the smell of the working class he despised. He drove south. As the skyline of downtown receded, the scenery changed. The luxury boutiques and well-lit avenues gave way to boarded-up storefronts, flickering streetlights, and potholes that rattled the SUV's suspension. He arrived at the address 40 minutes later. It was a brick tenement building that looked like it had survived a war. The front door was propped open with a cinder block. Damien checked the glove box. He pulled out a thick envelope of cash he kept for emergencies. $10,000 in hundreds. It was his opening bid. He stepped out into the rain. A group of men standing on the corner stopped talking and watched him. Damien kept his head down, pulling his collar up. He wasn't in the boardroom anymore. Here, his net worth meant nothing if he took a bullet. He climbed the stairs to the third floor. The hallway smelled of boiled cabbage and damp carpet. He found door 3B. The paint was peeling, revealing layers of blue and green beneath the cheap beige topcoat. He raised his fist to knock. Before his knuckles touched the wood, the door clicked. It opened inward. Evelyn Hart stood there. She wasn't wearing her waitress uniform. She was wearing oversized grey sweatpants and a faded university hoodie. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore thick-rimmed glasses. She held a mug of tea in one hand and the doorframe with the other. She didn't look scared. She looked annoyed. "You made good time," she said, taking a sip of tea. "I expected you to circle the block a few times before getting the courage to come up." Damien blinked, thrown off balance. "You were expecting me?" "Mr. Cross, you're a narcissist who just lost the keys to his kingdom. You weren't going to send a lackey. You were going to come yourself to ensure the help didn't screw it up." She stepped back, opening the door wider. "Well? Are you coming in, or are you going to stand in the hallway and get mugged? My neighbor, Mr. Henderson, has a pit bull that doesn't like expensive cologne." Damien stepped inside. The apartment was tiny. A single room served as the living area and kitchen, with a door leading to a bedroom and a bathroom. But what caught Damien's eye wasn't the poverty. It was the organization. The walls were covered in sticky notes. A whiteboard in the corner was covered in complex equations and flow charts. And on the small, rickety dining table sat 3 laptops, all humming, their screens glowing with streams of code. In the center of the table, sitting on a coaster, was his black flash drive. "You hacked it," Damien said, the realization hitting him like a punch. "Hacked is such an ugly word," Evelyn said, closing the door and locking 3 separate deadbolts. "I preferred audited, and I have to say, Damien, your bookkeeping is atrocious. Creative, certainly, but atrocious." Damien moved toward the table, his eyes fixed on the drive. "Give it to me." "Sit down," Evelyn commanded. Her voice wasn't loud, but it had the steel resonance of someone used to being obeyed. She pointed to a mismatched wooden chair opposite the laptops. Damien hesitated, then sat. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the envelope. He slammed it onto the table. $10,000, Damien said. "Cash, Untraceable. Take it. Give me the drive, and I forget this ever happened. I won't press charges for theft." Evelyn looked at the envelope, then up at Damien. She let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Theft? You left it on my table. By maritime salvage laws, I practically own your company now." She walked over to the laptops and tapped a key. A spreadsheet appeared on the center screen. "Let's talk about Shell Corp Alpha 9, Evelyn said, ignoring the money. "Registered in the British Virgin Islands, supposedly a consulting firm. But according to your own ledger, it's a funnel for bribing zoning officials in 3 different states. That's 15 years in prison right there, Damien. RICO charges." Damien's throat went dry. "You don't know what you're looking at." "Don't insult me," she snapped, her eyes flashing behind her glasses. "I was a forensic accountant for 6 years. I know a slush fund when I see one. But that's not the worst part, is it?" She tapped another key. A new document opened. It was a list of medical patent acquisitions. "You bought the patent for neurosex," she said, her voice dropping, losing its sarcasm and becoming deadly serious. "It's a beta blocker, used for experimental treatment of early-onset Alzheimer's and advanced neural degradation." Damien shifted in his chair. "It's a business asset. We acquired it to diversify." "You acquired it to kill it," Evelyn corrected. "You bought the patent from the startup that developed it, and then you shelved the production. Why? Because Apex Industries owns 40% of the market share for the older, less effective drugs that require daily doses for life. Neurosex was a one-time treatment course. It would have cured people, Damien. But it would have cost you billions in recurring revenue. So you buried it." Damien said nothing. The air in the room felt heavy, suffocating. This wasn't just about money laundering anymore. This was moral bankruptcy on a scale he had never vocalized, even to himself. He called it market strategy. She called it what it was. "How do you know about the drug?" Damien asked quietly. Evelyn turned and walked to the closed bedroom door. She opened it slightly. The sound of a rhythmic, mechanical hissing drifted out. The sound of an oxygen concentrator. "Look," she whispered. Damien stood up and looked inside. In the dim light, he saw a hospital bed, squeezed into the small room. An older man lay there, frail and pale, hooked up to tubes. He was asleep, but his breathing was labored. "That's my father," Evelyn said, closing the door gently. "He has neural degradation, the exact condition neurosex was designed to treat. He was on the trial list. We had hope. And then, 3 months ago, the trial was cancelled. The drug was pulled. The company was bought by a silent partner. You." She turned back to Damien, tears brimming in her eyes, but her expression remained fierce. "I'm working double shifts at the Obsidian Room to pay for palliative care, because the cure he needs is sitting in a vault in your basement, gathering dust so your stock price doesn't dip." Damien looked at the envelope of cash on the table. It looked pathetic now. $10,000 wouldn't buy a week of his life, and it certainly wouldn't buy her silence. "What do you want?" Damien asked. "You want me to restart the drug production? It would take years. The FDA approval alone." "I don't have years," Evelyn cut him off. "He has weeks." She walked back to the table and leaned over, her face inches from his. "I don't want your money, Damien. I want access. I want you to open the vault. I want the existing supply of neurosex that you seized during the acquisition. I know you kept the prototypes. Your ledger lists them as inventory, frozen storage at your private warehouse in Cicero." Damien shook his head. "That's illegal. Dispensing unapproved medication. If he dies, I'm liable for manslaughter. If the FDA finds out about this," she gestured to the flash drive, "you're going away for life. So, pick your poison, Mr. Cross. Do you want to be a savior for one man or a cautionary tale for the rest of Wall Street? Damien looked at the drive. Then he looked at the bedroom door. He had built his life on the philosophy that everyone had a price. He thought he could buy his way out of anything. But staring at Evelyn, he realized he was in a negotiation he couldn't win with a checkbook. She held the knife, and she had it pressed right against his jugular. "If I get you the drug," Damien said slowly, "I get the drive back, and you delete everything you've copied?" "You get the drive," Evelyn said, "and I don't release the data to the SEC, but I'm keeping a copy, as insurance, because a man who tips $2 as a joke isn't a man I trust to keep his word." Damien gritted his teeth. "Fine, but we have a problem." "What problem?" "The warehouse in Cicero," Damien said. "It's not just a storage facility. It's where Blackwood Logistics operates out of. The men guarding that place, they aren't standard security. They're mercenaries, and they don't answer to me directly. They answer to the board of shadow directors. If I walk in there at 4 a.m. demanding to remove frozen inventory, they're going to ask questions I can't answer." Evelyn crossed her arms. "You're the CEO. Figure it out." "I can't," Damien admitted, a rare look of defeat crossing his face. "I need authorization codes that are physically kept in the warehouse office, and if I trigger the alarm, the data on this drive wipes itself remotely. That's the failsafe. If I don't plug this drive into the warehouse server within—" He checked his watch. 6 hours. The system assumes I've been compromised and scrubs the servers." Evelyn stared at him. She began to type furiously on her laptop. "You're telling me," she said, her eyes scanning lines of code, "that we have to break into your own warehouse, physically retrieve the medicine, and plug this drive in to stop it from deleting the evidence I'm using to blackmail you?" "Essentially," Damien said. "Yes." Evelyn stopped typing. She looked at Damien, then at her father's room, and finally at the rain-streaked window. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. "Well," she said, reaching into a drawer and pulling out a set of blueprints. "It's a good thing I didn't just audit the books. I audited the building schematics, too. Do you know how to use a bolt cutter, Mr. Billionaire? Or do I need to teach you that, too?" Damien stood up, adjusting his trench coat. For the first time all night, he didn't feel like a victim. He felt a surge of adrenaline. "I learn fast," Damien said. "Good." Evelyn grabbed a black backpack and swept the flash drive into it. "Because your Aston Martin stands out, but my Civic is invisible. We're taking my car." The interior of Evelyn's 2014 Honda Civic smelled of vanilla air freshener and old receipts. For Damien Cross, a man who hadn't sat in a vehicle worth less than 6 figures in over a decade, it felt like a descent into a foreign country. The suspension creaked over every pothole on the I-90, and the wipers squeaked rhythmically, fighting a losing battle against the torrential downpour. Damien sat in the passenger seat, his knees pressed against the dashboard. He was still wearing his trench coat over his ruined Brioni suit. He looked at Evelyn. She drove with intense focus, her hands gripping the worn steering wheel at 10 and 2. "You realize," Damien broke the silence, his voice tight, "that if we get caught, my lawyers can't help us. Breaking and entering into a secure facility, even one I technically own, is a felony, especially with the mercenaries involved." "Then don't get caught," Evelyn said, checking her mirrors. "And stop fidgeting. You look suspicious." "I look like a billionaire sitting in a tin can," Damien muttered. "Why didn't we take the SUV?" "Because the SUV has a GPS tracker linked to your corporate security grid," Evelyn replied instantly. "And the Aston Martin has a low-jack system that pings your location every 30 seconds. This car is a ghost. It doesn't have Bluetooth GPS or satellite radio. To your security team, we're just a blip on the radar. Invisible." Damien fell silent. He looked out the window at the passing industrial wasteland of Cicero. He had never considered that his expensive toys were actually leashes. He had surrounded himself with technology that tracked his every move, thinking it was for his protection. In reality, it was a cage. And this waitress, whom he had dismissed as a nobody, was the only one free enough to navigate the cracks in the system. "Why are you helping me?" Damien asked. "You could have just emailed the files to the SEC and watched me burn." "I'm not helping you," Evelyn said, her voice hard. "I'm robbing you. There's a difference. And the moment I get that medicine for my father, our partnership ends." She exited the highway, navigating a maze of darkened warehouses and rusted chain-link fences. They approached a massive complex surrounded by high walls topped with razor wire. Floodlights swept the perimeter. The sign on the gate read, "Apex Logistics, authorized personnel only." "Park here." Damien pointed to a side street. "There's a blind spot in the camera coverage near the south loading dock. I installed it so I could sneak sensitive shipments in without logging them." "You mean the illegal shipments?" Evelyn corrected, pulling the car behind a dumpster. Semantics. They got out into the rain. The wind was biting. Damien shivered, not just from the cold, but from a growing sense of dread. He looked at the warehouse, his warehouse. It looked like a fortress. They moved through the shadows, Damien leading the way. He moved with surprising grace for a man in a suit. They reached the perimeter fence. Evelyn pulled a pair of heavy-duty bolt cutters from her backpack. "Allow me," she whispered. With a grunt of effort, she snapped the links of the fence, creating a hole just big enough to crawl through. Damien went first, dragging his expensive coat through the mud. He stood up on the other side, wiping grease from his hands. He felt a strange thrill. He was usually the man in the ivory tower looking down. Now he was in the mud, looking up. They sprinted across the wet asphalt to the side door. Damien punched a code into the keypad. Error. He tried again. Error. "They changed the codes," Damien hissed, panic rising in his chest. "The board blocked me out." "Move," Evelyn said. She pulled a small device from her bag, a Raspberry Pi computer hooked up to a ribbon cable. She pried the faceplate of the lock off with a pocket knife and jammed the cable into the service port. "What are you doing?" "Brute forcing the local cache," she muttered, typing commands on a small wireless keyboard. "Standard commercial locks have a default maintenance override. If your security chief is lazy, he left it set to factory settings." A second later, the light turned green. Click. "He's lazy," Evelyn smirked. "We're in." They slipped inside. The warehouse was cavernous, filled with towering rows of crates and shipping containers. It smelled of ozone and diesel. The hum of industrial cooling units filled the air. "The server room is on the 3rd level. The catwalk," Damien whispered. "The frozen storage is in the basement." "We go to the basement first," Evelyn said. "I'm securing the medicine." "No," Damien grabbed her arm. "We go to the server. I have to plug in the drive. If the timer runs out, the data wipes, and I have nothing to bargain with. The medicine won't matter if I'm in handcuffs." They stared at each other in the gloom. The tension was electric. "Fine," Evelyn hissed. "Server first, then the basement. But if you double-cross me, Damien, I swear I'll scream so loud every guard in this zip code comes running." "Deal." They crept toward the metal stairs leading to the catwalks. Below them, patrols of men in black tactical gear walked the floor with German shepherds. These weren't rent-a-cops. These were private military contractors. They carried assault rifles, not tasers. Damien felt a sick feeling in his stomach. He recognized the insignia on their shoulders, a black scorpion. That was the logo of Vargas Security, a mercenary group known for operating in war zones. He had hired them to protect his assets, but seeing them here, in his own city, patrolling like an occupying army, made him realize how far he had fallen. They reached the server room door. It was unlocked. Damien pushed inside. The room was cold, filled with the blinking blue lights of server racks. He rushed to the main terminal. He pulled the flash drive from Evelyn's bag and jammed it into the USB port. The screen flared to life. Identity confirmed. Data wipe aborted. Damien let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for hours. It's safe. The data is secure. Good, Evelyn said, already turning to the door. Now the basement. But before they could move, the computer screen behind Damien changed. A new window popped up. A red alert box. System alert. Priority message from Board of Directors. Damien turned back. He clicked the message. It was a video file, time-stamped from 2 hours ago. He played it. The face of Sebastian Vane, his biggest rival, appeared on the screen. But Vane wasn't alone. Standing behind him was Marcus Thorne, Damien's own lawyer. Damien, Vane said smoothly from the screen. If you're seeing this, it means you found the drive and you're trying to save your skin. It's too late. Thorne here told us everything. We've liquidated your shares. The hostile takeover is complete. And as for the loose ends, Vane smiled. Vargas has standing orders. Anyone found in the facility after midnight is to be treated as an industrial spy. Lethal force authorized. Goodbye, Damien. The video ended. Damien stared at the screen, his blood running cold. His lawyer, his friend of 10 years. He had sold him out. Damien, Evelyn whispered. What is it? They know, Damien said, his voice trembling. They know we're here. It's a trap. Suddenly, the lights in the warehouse slammed on. Blinding white floodlights bathed every corner of the facility. The loud wail of a siren began to scream. Intruder alert, a mechanical voice boomed. Sector 3, server room. Run! Damien yelled. They burst out of the server room onto the metal catwalk. Below them, chaos erupted. The mercenaries were shouting, pointing their rifles upward. A bullet pinged off the railing, inches from Evelyn's hip. Down! Damien shoved her to the metal grating. They're shooting at us! Evelyn screamed, her voice cracking with terror. You said they were security. They're a hit squad, Damien yelled back. Come on! He grabbed her hand and dragged her along the catwalk. They couldn't go down the main stairs. It was a kill zone. They had to use the fire escape on the north wall. They sprinted, their footsteps clanging loudly on the metal. Bullets whizzed past them, tearing through the air with terrifying cracks. Damien felt a sting on his cheek, a shard of metal from a bullet impact. He didn't stop. They reached the far end of the warehouse. The fire escape ladder was there. Damien kicked the release lever. The ladder slid down halfway. It jammed, rusted shut. It's stuck! Evelyn cried, looking over the edge. It was a 20-foot drop to the concrete. We have to jump, Damien said. Aim for the pallets of insulation foam. Are you crazy? Jump! He didn't give her a choice. He grabbed her waist and threw them both over the railing. They fell through the air, flailing. They crashed into a stack of pink insulation bundles. The foam broke their fall, but the impact knocked the wind out of them. They tumbled onto the floor, gasping. Move, move, move! Damien scrambled up, pulling Evelyn with him. They ran into the maze of shipping containers. The gunfire stopped, replaced by the barking of dogs and the shouting of orders. Seal the exits! A voice roared over the loudspeaker. It was a deep, gravelly voice. Vargas. Sweep the grid, flush them out. Damien pulled Evelyn into the shadow of a container. She was shaking violently. He grabbed her shoulders. Listen to me, he said, his eyes locking onto hers. We can't leave. They've sealed the perimeter. If we go outside, they'll pick us off with snipers. So we die in here? Evelyn sobbed. I just wanted the medicine. I just wanted to save my dad. Damien looked at her. He saw the raw fear, but also the love that drove her. She had walked into a war zone for her father. He had never done anything that's selfless in his life. He had built an empire on selfishness, and now it was trying to kill him. We're not going to die, Damien said, a sudden resolve hardening his features. And we are getting that medicine. How? They're everywhere. We're going to the basement, Damien said. The frozen storage. It's the only room in the building with reinforced titanium walls. It's bomb-proof. If we get in there, we can lock it from the inside. They can't get to us. But it's a freezer, Evelyn stammered. We'll freeze to death. Not if we're fast, and it's where the medicine is. They moved again, staying low. They used the noise of the cooling units to mask their footsteps. Damien knew the layout better than anyone. He led them through a maintenance tunnel that bypassed the main floor, dropping them out right in front of the heavy steel blast doors of the cryogenic storage unit. 2 guards stood by the door. Damien looked around. He saw a fire extinguisher on the wall. He looked at Evelyn. Can you distract them? He whispered. With what? My winning personality? Just make a noise. Throw something. Evelyn picked up a heavy wrench left on a crate. She hurled it down the hallway in the opposite direction. It clanged loudly against a metal pipe. What was that? One guard said. Check it out. One guard walked away. The other stayed, his back to Damien. Damien didn't hesitate. He wasn't a fighter, but he was desperate. He grabbed the fire extinguisher, rushed forward, and swung it with all his might. The red canister connected with the back of the guard's helmet with a sickening thud. The man crumbled. Damien fumbled for the guard's keycard. He swiped it. The blast doors hissed open. Get inside! He dragged the unconscious guard out of the way and shoved Evelyn into the room. He followed her in and slammed the emergency seal button. The massive doors groaned and locked shut with a definitive clunk. Silence. They were safe from the bullets, but the cold hit them instantly. The room was kept at 10 degrees Fahrenheit. It was filled with rows of metal shelves containing vials and boxes. Mist swirled around their ankles. It's freezing, Evelyn chattered, wrapping her arms around herself. The thermal suits should be by the door, Damien said, checking a locker. It was empty. Damn it, they moved them. Damien. Evelyn pointed to a shelf in the center of the room. A silver case sat there, labeled Neurosex, Prototype, Batch 001. That's it, she whispered. She ran to it. She opened the case. Inside were 12 vials of blue liquid. The cure. She clutched the case to her chest, tears freezing on her cheeks. I got it. Great, Damien said, his teeth chattering. Now we just have to survive long enough to figure out how to get out of here. He walked to the internal intercom on the wall. He pressed the button. Vargas, Damien said. I know you can hear me. A moment later, the speaker crackled. Mr. Cross, you've managed to put yourself in a literal cooler. Very poetic. Cut the crap, Vargas. I have the medicine, and I have the flash drive. The drive? Vargas laughed. The one you plugged in. We cut the hard line to the server room the moment you left. It didn't upload anything, Damien. You have no leverage. You're just a rat in a trap. Damien looked at Evelyn. Her face fell. The upload had failed. They had nothing. Here is the situation, Vargas continued. I can't blast those doors open without damaging the inventory. And the board wants the remaining neurosex destroyed properly, not blown up. So, I'm going to turn off the internal circulation fans. In about 1 hour, the temperature in there will drop to 40 below zero. You'll fall asleep and you won't wake up. It'll look like an accident, an industrial tragedy. Vargas, wait! Goodbye, Mr. Cross. The line went dead. The hum of the fans died down. The silence became oppressive. The cold began to bite deeper, stinging their skin like needles. Evelyn slid down against a shelf, clutching the case of medicine. She looked defeated. Ideally, she whispered, her lips turning blue. This isn't how I planned to spend my Tuesday. Damien looked at her. He looked at the woman who had challenged him, humiliated him, and then tried to save him. He looked at his suit, the symbol of his power, now useless against the cold. He took off his trench coat. "Put this on," he said, draping it over her. "No," Evelyn protested weakly. "You'll freeze." "I have the suit jacket," Damien lied. The suit was thin silk. "Put it on. Layering is the only way to survive." He sat down next to her. He pulled her close, sharing body heat. The billionaire and the waitress huddled together in the freezing dark, guarding a box of medicine. "Evelyn," Damien said, his voice shivering, "if we don't make it out, I'm sorry. About the tip. About everything." Evelyn rested her head on his shoulder. "You're still an idiot, Damien. But you're a better man than I thought." Damien watched his breath mist in the air. He felt his fingers going numb. He needed a plan. He needed a miracle. And then he remembered something. The fire suppression system. The room was a chemical storage unit. By law, it had to have a halon gas dump system to put out chemical fires without water. But the halon tanks were located outside the room, piped in through vents. If he could trigger the fire sensor inside the room, the system would dump halon gas. The pressure change would force the emergency vents to open to prevent the room from exploding. The vents led to the roof. It was a long shot. It was dangerous. Halon sucked the oxygen out of the air. They would have maybe 30 seconds to climb out before they suffocated. "Evelyn," Damien shook her. "Don't sleep. I have an idea. Do you have a lighter?" "I don't smoke," she mumbled. "Think. Anything." She fumbled in her pocket. "I have hand sanitizer, alcohol-based." "Perfect." Damien grabbed it. He took off his silk tie. "I need to start a fire, right under the heat sensor." "In a freezer?" "Watch me." He poured the sanitizer onto a pile of cardboard boxes he pulled from the trash bin. He ripped strips of his shirt to use as kindling. He needed a spark. He looked at the electronic lock on the inside of the door. He smashed the casing with the fire extinguisher. Wires hung loose. "Hold the wires," Damien commanded. "Touch them together when I say." Evelyn, shivering violently, grabbed the wires. "Now!" She tapped them. A blue spark jumped. It caught the alcohol fumes. A blue flame whooshed to life. Damien fed the cardboard into it. The fire was small, struggling against the cold, but the heat rose directly up to the sensor on the ceiling. They watched the tiny red LED on the sensor. "Blink! Blink!" "Come on," Damien whispered. "Burn!" The fire flared up. The sensor turned solid red. Alarm! A klaxon blared. "Masks!" Damien yelled. He ripped his shirt sleeve off and pressed it over Evelyn's mouth. "Cover your face! The gas is coming!" With a hiss like a jet engine, the vents opened. Thick white gas began to flood the room, but above them, the heavy steel louvers of the emergency exhaust vent clanged open to the night sky. "The vent!" Damien pointed up. It was 10 feet up. "I can't reach it!" Evelyn cried. "Climb on me!" Damien backed against the wall. He cupped his hands. "Go! Take the medicine and go!" Evelyn scrambled onto his shoulders. She reached up, grabbing the edge of the vent shaft. She pulled herself up, gasping for air as the halon filled the room below. She scrambled onto the roof. She looked down. Damien was still at the bottom, coughing, the gas swirling around his waist. "Damien, take my hand." She reached down. He jumped, grabbing her wrist. He was heavy, his body numb from cold. Evelyn screamed with effort, digging her heels into the tar paper of the roof. She pulled. He kicked against the wall. Inch by inch, she dragged the billionaire out of his own frozen tomb. He flopped onto the roof beside her, gasping for sweet, fresh air. They lay there in the rain, staring at the sky. They were alive. But they were still on the roof of a fortress, surrounded by men who wanted them dead. "We need a vehicle," Damien wheezed. "Something they can't stop." He rolled over and looked across the roof. There, sitting on the helipad, was the answer. The company helicopter. An Airbus H1405. "Do you know how to fly?" Evelyn asked, clutching the medicine case. Damien wiped soot and rain from his face. A wild grin appeared. "I took lessons," he said. "I crashed twice in the simulator. But tonight I'm feeling lucky." The rotors of the helicopter screamed as bullets pinged off the fuselage. On the roof below, Vargas's mercenaries fired wildly into the night sky. Damien yanked the controls and the machine lurched upward, barely clearing the warehouse edge before banking hard over the Chicago skyline. Inside the cockpit, silence fell as the adrenaline faded. They were alive, but they were fugitives. "We can't land at the private airstrip," Damien said, scanning the instruments. "Vane will have men waiting, and I can't go back to the penthouse." "Then go to the feds," Evelyn said, plugging the flash drive into the console. "Land on the federal building roof. But before you do, upload the files. Send everything to the press and the DOJ. Burn Vane's empire to the ground." Damien stared at the city lights. If he uploaded those files, he wasn't just destroying his enemies, he was admitting to his own crimes. He would lose his company, his fortune, and his freedom. But looking at Evelyn, the waitress who had risked her life to save a father she loved, he realized his billions had brought him nothing but loneliness. "Do it," Damien commanded. Evelyn initiated the upload. As the progress bar hit 100%, Damien felt a weight lift off his chest. He banked the helicopter toward the federal building to face the music. He had lost his net worth, but for the first time, he had found his worth. 6 months later, the bell above Hart's diner chimed. The small restaurant smelled of fresh coffee and optimism. Evelyn wiped down the counter, smiling as she watched her father in a booth, laughing with a neighbor. The neurosex patent had been released to the public as part of the Apex settlement, and the treatment had saved his life. The door opened, and a man walked in. He wore simple jeans and a canvas jacket, his hair a little longer, his face free of the arrogance that once defined him. It was Damien. He sat at the counter. "Coffee, please." "Black." "You look good," Evelyn said, pouring him a cup. "How's life on the outside?" "Probation and community service," Damien said, taking a sip. "My testimony took down Vane, Thorne, and half the board. I lost the assets, but I kept my soul. I have a job interview today. Entry-level logistics, $18 an hour. It's a start," Evelyn smiled. Damien finished his coffee and placed a $5 bill on the counter. "Keep the change." Evelyn hesitated, then reached into her apron. She pulled out a plastic sleeve containing a crumpled $2 bill and a napkin that read, "Get a real job." She slid it toward him. "You can have this back," she said softly. Damien pushed it back to her. "No, you keep it. Frame it." "Why?" Damien smiled, a genuine, warm expression. "To remind me that the cost of being human is a lot higher than $2, and that sometimes the person serving you is the only one who can save you." He turned and walked out into the sunlight, broke, but finally free. "So, what do you think? Did Damien deserve his redemption?" It's a powerful reminder that money is just paper, but character is the only currency that matters. Evelyn proved that true strength isn't about how much you can buy, but how much you can endure for the people you love. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that even the mightiest can fall and the humble can rise. Thanks for watching.